Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Carrie Cisna. I'm the Executive Director for the Interfaith Center here at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And I'm really excited to be introducing a research team that I've been on for a while called the Work-Life Integration Project. And we will introduce our team members and share a little bit more about our purpose. But today, specifically, we're introducing the topic of male allies. We want to learn more about what male allies are, sharing some lessons learned, and also here's some strategies for how men can be allies for women, but also how we can get more, who's already been a male ally, but how can we get more to be more involved with the issues of women in leadership and women with issues pertaining to work-life balance. So as we get started, I want to introduce Dr. Margaret Weber, who is the founder of the Work-Life Integration Project that we'll be hearing from today. So I want to just ask you, Dr. Weber, to share a little bit more about the background and the history.
Thank you, Carrie. So the Work-Life Integration Project was started over a decade ago, and we have now interviews with over 700 women leaders from the U.S. and around the world. And these interviews are just amazing. Much has changed in this time, in just a decade, yet in many ways, little has changed, particularly to the roles that women assume for private and professional life. With the pandemic, the stories, I think, are even more important to us as we discuss ways to conceive work and its implications for all of us, men and women, for individuals, families, careers, and our sense of purpose in this globalized world. We have published 3 books from the project. Talk a little bit about those a little later. The major goal of the project is to utilize these narratives from women around the globe in actionable research to influence equity issues in the political arena and the public square. Many women have expressed that there isn't balance. The project started out originally as work-life balance, but we changed it because they talked about that there could be an integrated life when we blur the boundaries between the personal and the professional. Women were always recreating, open to opportunities, sometimes because they had to, but other times because they wanted more out of life. So we believe this topic of men as allies is especially relevant today with remote work, distribution of work, home duties, career management, and a new way of thinking of working following the pandemic. We invite you to participate in our study, and at the end will be our website, and you can go on and participate in the instrument that we have used. Oops. So Carrie is going to share about the Interfaith Center at Miami University.
Yes, so for those of you who are new to understanding what the Interfaith Center is, it's an organization, a nonprofit organization that's been around for 100 years, actually. It started out as an ecumenical organization, bringing together Christian ministries across the city to work together for social action. And in 2014, it transitioned to become an interfaith organization. We do have a Hillel on campus and a Muslim student organization and other groups that represent variety of faiths. So we try to be that common, safe space for us to come together to talk about issues for social change and social innovation. This year, we've been doing a series on women and women's bodies and the connection between religion and women. There was a big decision made from our Supreme Court this year that impacted women. So we made a series of events to really just educate ourselves more and to understand who's hurting, how can we be there for those who are hurting and impacted by these decisions. So really, it's just a safe space to come together, regardless of your political beliefs or your religious ideologies, so that we can see that we all have common shared values and a shared experience as a human. So it's an exciting place to be. And I was talking with Dr. Amanda Wickramasinghe about doing a program for male allyship, and it seemed like a perfect fit to kind of round out this series that we've been doing for how to get involved with women's issues and supporting women. So I've been on the team for the Work-Life Integration Project since 2009 when we began. As Margaret said, we now have 3 published books. So if you want to go to that slide, we've collected interviews from women in leadership around the world. Over 9 countries have been represented, and those global perspectives are in our 3rd published book. The authors are here on this call today, but we have lots of studies on a lot of variety of different topics. And we just want to look specifically on one thing that a lot of these women have in common is the support that they have received from others. And specifically on this call, we're going to talk about the support that they've received from men, in hopes that we can inspire men to be involved as allies, but also how can we understand allyship and start to use our own networks to see supportive allyship. So moving on, I'm going to introduce Dr. Amanda Wickramasinghe, who can tell us a little bit more about allyship. Before I do, this is the format of this panel. We have 5 presenters here that have all contributed to our research. Dr. Amanda Wickramasinghe, myself, Dr. Veronica, and Dr. Stacy. We have a lot of doctors in the house, and Dr. Elena. We're going to just go around. We have 3 questions we're each going to answer, and then we're going to open it up to see if you would like to contribute to the conversation. Before we do, I want to start with a Baha'i scripture. The Baha'i faith is a religious ideology that believes that we're all connected and we're all one human family. And they really believe in equality amongst men and women. And they have this beautiful scripture that says the world of humanity has 2 wings. One is woman and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Should one wing remain weak, flight is impossible. Not until the world of women becomes equal to the world of men in the acquisition of virtues and perfections can success and prosperity be attained as they ought to be. So this event today hopefully will help us get a little bit more knowledge and understanding around how can we reach that state of equanimity where the bird of humanity can fly because the wings of both male and female are supporting each other. These are the 3 books, and go ahead and I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Amanda Wickramasinghe to tell us a little about what allyship is before we start to talk about our own personal experiences.
Thank you, Dr. Carrie Cisna, my dear friend. Thank you all for joining us today for this conversation. We are thankful to the Interfaith Center at Miami University for inviting us to participate in this exchange. So what is allyship, especially given this global world in which we all live and operate in? Essentially, allyship is to help join forces, connect, support, unite, and of course, assist and aid. Now, as professionals, as colleagues, as co-workers, it's important for all of us to engage in personal growth and community development. And one of the best ways to do so is through the capacity of being an ally. What are some pillars for allyship? Well, first and foremost, it's important to ask questions. Always ask questions about everyone's journey, get to know your fellow colleagues and your coworkers so that you too can serve as an ally. Listen, always practice active listening and listen with an empathetic ear because you never know what someone else is going through. Show up for each other. Regardless of if you're a male ally or a female ally, always be there for each other and support each other and uplift and amplify different types of voices. And finally, speak up. Sometimes we're in different types of settings and contexts, and it's hard to engage. So one of the best ways to engage is really to speak up. And if you see something that is not appropriate or incorrect, it's important for you to speak up and amplify other voices, especially if they are quiet or timid. Help each other grow. And the best way to do so is through the art of allyship. Now, allyship also fosters that inclusivity because it allows all voices to be heard. And I also will recommend to understand different cultural nuances and practice cultural intelligence that contributes to developing allyship, because when you know more, you're able to build relationship capital and social capital, which will, of course, transcend into being a better ally for each other. Next slide, please. Now, through the next few slides, my colleagues and I, we're going to be discussing how our own personal narratives add to these questions and also share about our respective countries that we all have researched. So I will begin. Some of the examples of some ways that men or males have served as allies to me was that I've been very fortunate. The last 10 years, I've had a lot of great, not only female mentors, but male mentors as well. And especially at the onset of my professional life, I was a bit timid, and that's not the case anymore. But I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid because I was thinking, well, I'm the new girl. I should listen more and pay attention. And it was my male colleagues who actually kept telling me, no, you're not just a new girl. You need to speak up, and you need to share your voice and share your ideas, because that's important. And they kept just kind of nudging me in a lot of different ways. And I learned to open my mouth and voice my opinion. And it takes some time, especially when you're at the onset of your professional life. And throughout the years, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great male mentors who have served as allies and who have opened a lot of doors for me and always encouraged me to speak up. And the way they did that is by listening to me and by amplifying my own voice and letting me know that there's a pathway for me here. So learn to share my ideas. So that's one of my examples. I'll turn it over to Dr. Carey to share hers.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. I would like to tell a story about my first year out of grad school. I had my first real job at a university, and my boss invited me to present. I was running a living learning community, a leadership community, and he asked me to come to a conference with him and present a workshop. And I had never done that before, and I was so excited. I spent so much time preparing for it. And we were presenting together, and I ended up speaking almost the whole time and answering all the questions. And he was like, wow, I didn't even realize like how much you knew about this. And it was very life-changing for me. Since that was like in 2003, and I've presented at conferences every year since, usually a couple every year. And I was exposed to, when you go to a conference, it's just knowledge sharing. You meet colleagues from around the world. You get a lot of best practices from around the world. I always come back inspired, and I have new partnerships. So I'm an academic. I also teach at a university, and I have relied on male allies to open doors for me in this kind of research and sharing my research and conferences, but also publications. I had a professor, Dr. Eric Schockman at Pepperdine University, who tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'm writing a book chapter. Would you like to join me? And I did, and we collected some research for that book chapter, and we analyzed the research, and I ended up turning that into a dissertation later on and continuing the research, which led me to a lot of other places, including presenting our research at a conference in Boston, where I met some colleagues who introduced me to a postdoc fellowship. I have multiple book chapters, publications from that conference. So I would say it's really important for males to realize historically, men get more published than women. And so if they can open doors for women to get more publications and do presentations at conferences, it not only builds self-esteem and confidence in the academic world, but it also creates more equity in the voices that are being heard and published. And that's just really important. So I would say for all men to consider, if you are publishing and presenting at conferences, look around you and see who could you invite and mentor along the way. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Veronica right now to share what examples she has for male allyship.
Veronica, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. So hi, I'm Dr. Veronica. Thank you, Dr. Carey. Great example. I can share experiences that you've just shared that I've had, but I'll add on to it. My husband just been by my side and doing a lot of role modeling for our community has been a way that opened doors for others in our community. Our community means Nigerian American community. We share roles as co-parents. We are community helpers, and people see that. And so that it's not just telling people you need to be community helpers, but seeing a woman playing some major roles, and my husband giving me the independence and the full support to lead in a community and engage a community and bring changes and role model for the second generation, because we're the first generation really settlers in America, has been outstanding for a man from our culture to just have that self-confidence to open doors for me and step back and just let me be me. And even to have left my home, and he played the full parent role when I was doing my Pepperdine doctoral degree, is an outstanding role for a man from my culture to just let your wife do what she wants to do and spend 3 years traveling back and forth to attend my courses at Pepperdine in Malibu, and I'm in the Northern California. So that's a very important male role, an ally that allowed me to be who I am today, to have to be able to participate in WLIP now, and to do so many things that transform our community has been totally innovative. And some of the roles from are also engaging in the care and maintenance of the family, the home, developing strategies to mindfulness, because mindfulness means that in my culture is a huge role for a man to transform from being the person who tells you what to do to the person who's mindful of your own needs, of your own energy, of your own ideas. And that's also been prominent in our community. I have been a beneficiary of it, and I know that me having been in that role has also impacted a lot of other women in our community, and I'm really proud of it. And it's something that we need to expand, because women do have great ideas and they're actually really super leaders. And as men open doors and collaborate with women, we would bring those positive changes that we want in our community, in the world. And not just my role, but we've had African women now as leaders of their nation, and we need more of that. And I feel that, well, I'm not planning to be president of our nation, but more of that is what the world needs so that we can all bring our heads together. We saw what happened in the Supreme Court to women, and that's also a lack of bringing women to conversations that impact them, and what impacts women impacts the community, impacts the world, impacts the universe. So definitely, I have been a real beneficiary of Ally with Men, giving back, volunteering. I've been a leader in our community in giving back, ranging from intelligence to community service, and to sharing my educational values with our second gen and even the first gen. Men have allowed me to lead in our community, which is really powerful. I have a lot to say about Ally with Men, but I think I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Stacy Montgomery.
Thank you, Dr. Veronica. I wanted to share a specific example. My supervisor and mentor at Pepperdine, Mark Davis, he was very supportive when I talked with him about balancing my role and pursuing my doctorate. So while I was taking my classes and writing and through the whole doctoral journey, and I was grateful that that was able to come to fruition with his support and even his personal example of how he recruited women leaders within student affairs. And as the sole male, sometimes coming from Pepperdine to a women's conference, a regional women's conference each year, just wanting to show support to the women leaders within student affairs and to continue his learning, and also show his support of how he's proud of the women that were at Pepperdine at this conference, was an example that really stood out to me. And now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Elena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stacy. Really appreciate it, and all the comments from everyone. For me, those that have acted as allies for me have really been in the sponsorship and mentoring area. Most of my mentors have been male. I have worked in a mostly male-dominated environment, so it has been very helpful that these men have sponsored me and spoke for me, spoke about me when I'm not in the room, and really also mentored me. But one of my earliest mentors is Dr. John Wyatt from my undergrad. And he really, like, not just myself, but, you know, other women and men, really taught everybody how to advocate for each other, how to negotiate our salaries, how to go out and network, and how to learn how to network effectively, and how to build relationships, and really how to be a good mentee and how to be a good mentor, right? So that we give back. So as we went off into the workplace, he really kept us connected to the undergrads so that we could then mentor them through the process of getting their first jobs, going off into the workforce, and then also coming back for a master's, and then doing that same kind of mentorship cycle. It's been really important. Also to, you know, I continue to fall back on him, you know, even to this day. And then to add one other story was just with what Dr. Veronica was saying, is my husband was a big supporter and a role model, as well as to, you know, when I'm falling into the things that women do sometimes where we feel maybe hesitant to speak our voice, you know, he'll encourage me and say, no, you should speak up for yourself. It's a fact. Just say what the facts are, regardless. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be shy, you know, without being assertive, without being aggressive, right? There's a way to do it, and men seem to know how to do it. And so really having those role models show us how to have those conversations is really important. So I really encourage, you know, men to reach out to all the women in their lives and really help them, you know, back up their ideas, support them in meetings. If there's a conversation that happened outside the meeting, you know, really come back to the meeting and say, you know, I was having a conversation with Dr. Carey, and she really brought up this great idea. Really, you know, vouch for each other, and we're stronger together because of it. And so now I'll hand it over to the next slide. So Dr. Carey, do you want me to continue?
I think Dr. Amanda.
Oh, okay, Dr. Amanda, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Elena. That was a great example and story. So now we're going to be discussing examples of how men serve as allies in other countries. As I mentioned, my colleagues and I, we've studied different countries and the cultures and women's issues in these different countries. So we're going to be sharing some examples from our respective research. So examples of how men serve as allies. So I studied women in Sri Lanka. I am Sri Lankan, and it was one of the most fascinating endeavors that I've taken on because I learned so much about my culture and of the women's issues and what the women are actually going through. So in Sri Lanka, it's definitely a collectivist country, and it has that mindset of a shared responsibility and global growth. So I'm happy to share that we've seen so many men, especially in the recent years, really step up and help women amplify their voices. In the past 10 years, we've seen so many women take on executive leadership roles at multinational organizations in Sri Lanka, specifically in Colombo, as through the art of allyship. They're using not only their mentors and their sponsors, but they're creating allyships with different types of male leaders who are promoting these women who are incredibly qualified to be in these respective roles. Sri Lanka also is a country where we value family and we value our community. So I've also seen the most in the last 10, 20 years, men are very supportive of their wives becoming strong leaders and community leaders as well. They're helping their wives amplify their voices by helping them speak up and letting them know that their ideas matter. I too, just like my colleagues have shared, I have a very supportive husband. I always call him my most trusted advisor. And he's just an exemplary example of someone who's always promoting others. So he has told me, especially the last 10, in the last 7 years that we've been married, learn to use your voice, speak up. It's fine. You need to, even if you're wrong, it's okay. We all make mistakes, but learn to use your voice to your advantage and share your ideas. And of course, do it in a respectful manner. And I've seen that sentiment shared among a lot of my other Sri Lankan women colleagues and friends. They too have supportive husbands who are helping them amplify their voices. So we're moving away from where women were more caretakers and the ones who really took care of children and their families, to having women have more elevated voices within the communities and within their respective organizations. So those are some examples from Sri Lanka, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carey to share her examples.
Thank you, Dr. Amanda. This has been so inspiring. I love all of your examples so far. I studied a group of women and leaders who come from America. So in doing some research on what's happening with here, I have a tangible example and one I read in the Washington Post. In the Washington Post, I read that there was some research done that shows that when men speak to other men about women's issues, it tends to have more impact. So like Dr. Elena mentioned earlier, just speaking up and using your voice is really powerful. So sometimes we might think, oh, that's a gendered issue. That's a woman's issue. I shouldn't really worry about that. But a male voice speaking up on behalf of men, there is research to show that you can have greater reach with people within your own circle. So again, just like really empowering men to see themselves as a change maker and someone who can really speak up and use their voice to make a difference. And then I'll give one example. We have a colleague who we graduated with at Pepperdine, and he went to Montana to become a superintendent. And he ended up becoming president of all the superintendents in Montana. And he invited me to come and lead a panel on women in leadership for all of the women that he had identified as female leaders. And so I really appreciated how he gave up the mic, because he could have easily led this panel of women, but he identified women and leaders, gave them the mic, and said, we want to hear from you. What has your experience been? So we created this women in leadership panel to hear from women who were superintendents or in state legislature, just women in their communities who were making an impact, to hear what their lived experience was. Who are their allies? How did they get to those places? And a lot of the women did share that someone had to tap them on the shoulder for them to realize they were a leader or could be a leader. And I think that's really important for men to just realize, like, it's important for you to go out of your way and to really encourage people to run for positions or to apply for positions. And then also when you're in leadership yourself, to create that space where you are able to share the mic and to see the importance, going back to that Baha'i scripture, of having equality and having men and women at the table when any decisions are being made. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Veronica.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Carey. Certainly, I'll follow the same position that Nigeria is the country that I'm referencing. Nigeria had been a nation where men were automatically the leaders. Going back to the African history, there were women leaders in the past, and I think that's re-emerging because the voice of women is now being allowed in leadership, at home, and in the community. So, and also bringing men to Nigeria as playing roles of women is been a trend, especially with the impact of the Nigerian diaspora. Men are now participating actively in the care of children. The West forced men to take on that role because you would either have to pay a nanny, and you and I know how much it is to have a permanent nanny. So what do? You share leadership of being in the care of your children. So women and men are allies in the care of their children at home in diaspora, and the trend is being seen at home. Lending a hand in the house chores. It sounds simple, but those are ways that you start building the community together. So there's been that ally that women now have, that I have at home, of my husband and husbands and men playing the roles that women typically used to play, and allowing women to be assertive and not describe them as aggressive. And I think that's a societal redefinition that needs to occur, because that also allows the freedom for women to play the role of bringing changes to our community. Sharing opportunities to include women has been happening. We have women senators now. We have women who also drive cabs, which was a typical man cab, and some odd roles that men would typically be the leaders, be the players. We see the allyship of men and women in that in Nigeria, both at home and here in diaspora. Sharing non-promotable workload, so that men don't have to feel that they would always be the ones in the role that has promotion, but that women are typically thrown into those roles. So you see, men are becoming allies in playing all those roles that they typically won't be a part of. Helping fight biases. There's a lot of bias in the culture, and men are now speaking up for women, that they don't have to be subdued and be in the back room and be in the kitchen, that they can be in the front room as well. Being visible, men being visible and valuing women, and not doing it behind closed doors, but doing it publicly, so that women take on the roles that would help bring the changes that communities need. Also, publicly celebrating women is happening. Women are now respected to play roles in, for example, the Nollywood industries, and it's outstanding the impact that they're having on the younger girls and the economy. Nigeria is a fast-growing economy, and you see women becoming managing directors, which is like CEO here in Africa, in America. Women becoming political leaders, senators, House of Rep, which is a House of Congress here. Women leading governmental organizations, having their NGO. In fact, there's been a lot of growth in all of those areas. Women are truly becoming allies with men, and men allies with women. Those are not very visible because there's more information about what's not going well, but there's a lot going well. In the fast-growing economy of Nigeria, women are prominent allies of men, and we'll continue to push on that, because it's the only way to go. So thank you. I'm going to push it to Dr. Stacy.
Thank you, Dr. Veronica. Since my research was focused on women in the United States, I will be speaking similar, like Dr. Carey, in regards to American examples of how men serve as allies and companies that are more progressive. I wanted to offer two examples that really demonstrate the workplace flexibility is one, where it's not just this is for women, but this is how we as a male supervisor or female supervisor, how we promote a company culture that offers workplace flexibility for families. And so it's seen through, sometimes it's a hybrid approach that best helps support the lifestyle, if there's kids that are involved, or caregiving, and then also providing scheduling, so the flexibility, so that if there are needs, whether it's you got to drop off the kids at school or you want to attend an important, recognition ceremony, a soccer game, that you model it. So it's not like this is just for women, but this is how we support work-life integration. And then, as we know, there's a lot of progressive companies that are also modeling. It's not just maternity leave, it's parental leave. It's giving both parents the opportunity to be able to have the opportunity when they bring in a new child. We actually have one of our own doctors here that's going to be in that situation, but to be able to spend the time regardless of gender, and to be able to welcome your child into your home and spend the time together. So those are my two examples, and I would love to pass it on to Dr. Elena.
Thank you so much. My research was on Costa Rica, and similar to Dr. Amanda, my family is from Costa Rica, and so it was a great opportunity to learn more about the culture and really things that I intuitively already knew, as far as maybe how women are viewed in the workplace. But this gave me some, more information about it. So I think what's really been interesting in Costa Rica is that the policies for women and children have created a culture that allows for allyship, meaning that they have a gender quota for representation in government. And that started since 1996 and led to eventually a female president in 2010. And now almost 50% representation in government. So those women are part of the conversation, creating policies for women and children and people with disabilities, and really things that as a nation they care about. And it's really, as far as in addition, they have free healthcare and education for all, closing the literacy gap as well, and the gender education gap in Costa Rica. So that kind of creates this environment today that can push for things like equal pay. Recently this year, they passed a bill to ensure that they have equal pay for the same type of work for men and women. And men have also become very open and proud of their women, of women working and having those corporate jobs. The other unique thing that they have in the country is a sense of community and support from the community and family. So they can support for healthcare, but they do have great policies for parental leave, for Social Security and things like that, which has created this environment where men can support women. So very things that we can all learn from. And I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Dr. Amanda?
Thank you. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yes. Oh,
The final question that we will address is, how can we encourage men to become allies for women? And I will share two examples from my own research and my own personal experiences. Three of my mentors currently are male. And one of the best things I've seen them do is just engage in conversation with their female colleagues. That's one of the best ways to learn about each other. And I'm very fortunate because all three of my mentors who are men have opened so many doors, not only for myself, but to my other female colleagues as well. And it's simply through just having conversations and learning about their female colleagues. So I encourage all the men who are joining us today and who are watching this recording later on, please engage in conversations with your female colleagues and get to know them, learn about their interests, their aspirations, their families. And that will help you understand not only their future ambitions, but also how you can be a better ally to them. The second example I want to share is, as women, we should share the importance of advocating for other women with our husbands, with our sons, with our brothers, and any other male colleagues and friends that we have, because that's really important. We should encourage them, our male colleagues and friends, to just always engage with other women and help promote them. My husband had two very strong role models growing up, his mother and his grandmother. And I really feel the reason he's such a great advocate, not only for his male colleagues, but for his female colleagues, is because he had that solid foundation. His mother and grandmother were very strong women. They were community leaders, and it really showed him the importance of advocating for everyone. And I see that in his actions, not only in our home, but also at the workplace. So encourage your husbands, your brothers, and your other male friends and colleagues to advocate for female leaders. And I'll pass it over to Dr. Carey.
Thank you so much. That's such a great example. I would just add that it's important to recognize decision-making bodies and whether or not there's female representation on this. If it's a committee, but specifically if there is a corporate board, or most organizations have some sort of board, I would really just encourage you, if you sit on a board and you're a male, or even if you're a female, but to just recognize the role in helping to get women into those seats, encouraging women to apply, and encouraging women to help be represented in any sort of decision-making body. It's really important to have inclusive decisions. Something's just missing if we're just hearing from one side of the gender pool. And I'll pass it on to Veronica with that.
Thank you again, Dr. Carey. I appreciate what you just said. I believe in that. In my own study as well, the phenomenological study of Nigerian women leaders and how the impact changes in Nigeria. And currently with my work in a community and even my family experiences, is that what really, really works is active listening. And we can force it, we can role model it, we can ask for men, make sure we're defining what we mean by active listening. Getting men to listen. Women are experts of our own life experiences, and we seek opportunities to be part of what's happening. And we need to have men hear our stories, hear our perspective, and take our concerns that we have seriously without interrupting, because that's active listening, trying to downplay what we have to say, or sexism, but to just allow us to be equitable partners. I don't use equal, but equitable partners in decision-making, reflecting on our own power and privilege that they have as men, that they should help open those doors. And then we need to invite other women. Once men open those doors, we need to invite other women as well. So keep the ladder, long, and keep stretching that ladder so other women can climb on, making sure women credit their female partners and co-workers and team players, that women are given the opportunity by the platform being open to not just men as leaders of teams. Women can lead, they can lead excellently well, and that needs to be clearly accepted and clearly announced and clearly shared. And advocate for gender equitable policies in our workplace, in our teams, in our organizations, in our communities, and so on. And just making sure that respect is non-negotiable. Respect is earned, but also for it to be earned, the door needs to be open. People need to listen and respond with no assumptions, and keep that platform open for everyone. And so that's mine on equity and allyship with men, and men being shown the path to us being included. And thank you so much. I'd like to pass it on to my awesome colleague, Dr. Stacy.
Thank you, Dr. Veronica. I want to just continue the importance of creating a culture and validating the good things that are already happening, whether it's in a work environment or it's within an organization, celebrating accomplishments, really showing the value of personal example, whether as Dr. Carey was talking about representation, where when you're looking at mentoring, sponsorship, networks, really finding ways to have it come to life so that it's something that becomes modeled and replicated, and then just using the opportunities to, especially I've noticed this within a lot of work settings, when transitions happen, if there's maternity or paternity leave, for example, how is it presented when you're talking about the transition? Is it presented in a positive way, or, well, we have to, we have this amount of time that we have to come up with a solution? Or is it put in, hey, we're so excited for them and for this opportunity for us? And it's the way that transitions take place. It's with reentry. It's the way that the culture is fostered. So the more intentionality that can be placed on being supportive and really being intentional with inclusion, and how women could be supported, how families can be supported, and how there's positive examples of the men as allies, that creates just a better environment, and it just keeps that momentum going. So I'm going to, and I have a article I'm going to put in, a spring report from Harvard that I'm going to put in the chat that shares different strategies as well, but I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Elena.
Thank you, Dr. Stacy. Research shows that there's a lot of opportunities that are offered, and they're offered to men. So one of the things that men can do is to share some of those opportunities with women. So as an opportunity comes up, maybe defer and say, I'd like to see, Carrie has an opportunity for this one. Also, to publicly celebrating accomplishments. I think we touched on it several times, but it's really important that in the room, we really, men have an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of their coworkers and the women in their life and in their surroundings. Additionally, women tend to be either voluntold or volunteer for the non-promotable workload. So taking the minutes at a meeting, some of the logistics. Those are things you're not going to get promoted for. However, they're important things to the team. So if men would share in that workload and take some of that on, that would free up women to take on some of those other more visible projects or visible tasks in a team environment. And then, of course, we talked about sponsorship and mentoring. Very important for men to sponsor women, mentor women, but specifically sponsor women. Men tend to be sponsored more often than women. And the difference there is that this is what happens when you're not in the room and how you're spoken about to higher ups. You want to make sure that women are part of that conversation. And then be visible. And by that means is show up in social media and support women publicly. Support them at the workplace, support them in meetings, support them to other men. Don't be afraid to come to meetings like this. Very important, how men can support women, and really just understand that these are not just women issues, but really these are like human issues, and really impacts families. And if women are successful, it helps the whole family and the environment and the community. So we really want to think about as we help each other. And I think that's the bottom line. And I'll pass it on. Thank you.
So we're ready for questions and discussion. So we just invite everyone to unmute and participate in adding some of your own examples, sharing from those examples. I think of Cheryl Sandberg, who said the single most decision a woman will make is choosing their partner. And some of you have talked about that in terms of your partners or significant others, how supportive and how much of an ally they've been. So let's just open it up and have that discussion. Carrie, I'll just turn it to you for that discussion.
Yeah, Paul, you had said in the chat box that you need to leave by 3, so I want to throw it to you first. Is there any comments you would like to make or strategies that you have about male allies before you leave?
I've been appreciative of everything that I've been hearing. I have noted that my colleagues, Sherwood and Amr and I'm not 100% sure, might be the only male identified people who have been a part of this webinar to kind of, at least this afternoon, morning, depending on where you are in the country. I think I've had the privilege and just the honor of being, as somebody kind of earlier mentioned, mentored by a lot of really, really powerful women throughout my life, my mother, my sisters, and then also some former supervisor / bosses of mine as well. You know, honestly, I still remember very vividly when I was a young boy, one of my sisters kind of sitting me down and just explaining to me why I needed to be respectful and why I needed to kind of do things that I felt like and I've always kind of felt like have been just like simple, you know, like really straightforward things, which is just to obviously be nice and empathetic and understanding and all of those different things. Of course, it's evolved, I think, as a professional to do many of the things that you've said, not just kind of mentor and support colleagues and employees, but also really kind of going that step further to be able to support them in their growth and their progression as professionals. And I'll definitely take to heart, you know, thinking about as many of the different types of opportunities that I can to support my female identified colleagues in the work that I do. So that's a little bit, but thank you all so much. I really appreciate hearing all of your perspectives, particularly the international ones, just given how kind of US centric, right, a lot of this work tends to be.
Thank you so much, Paul. Sherwood, do you want to follow up with that?
No, thank you. I agree with everything Paul has said. And also want to thank you all. I would be curious to hear, as a really varied group of women, to what extent have you found there to be any differences in the roles or in the ways that men of color can support women of color versus the general conversation of men supporting women?
I'd like to take that. What I found is in my research with women and especially minority women, minority men face a lot of the same issues that minority women face. So although helpful for minority men to stand up for women and vice versa, you know, unfortunately, we still live in a, you know, there's still, unless that individual is very prominent in the organization, we really need the advocates to be at the executive level and the senior level for, you know, at least in a corporate setting or whoever is the decision makers, whether they are of color or not. We all know that they tend to, as we go up the chain, that we lose the color along the way. So we really want to advocate for not just, and when I talk about it, minority women, minority women, and men, because they tend to face the same issues. So at least here in the United States, we really want to make sure that we support minority men as well, and that they know that they're part of this conversation. Is that helpful?
That's helpful. I was also sort of asking, as a Black man, are there different ways that you've seen men of color being supportive? I totally agree that we face some of the same issues of racism and discrimination in predominantly white higher ed, but just wondering if there are any things that might be more specific as a man of color that might be things for me to keep in mind that hasn't been mentioned.
Yeah, I would say it goes to the fact that if you're able to speak up for others, to do that and to really be cognizant of, and similar to, I think what I think Dr. Veronica said, or was helping, women helping other women, people of color helping people of color, right? Really, you've been through it, what others are going through, be an advocate for each other and really speak up and mentor, give, and I know that it puts a lot of burden. People say, well, the burden's on the person of color to help each other out, but it really is essential. I can hand it over to see if anybody wants to add to that.
One thing that I wanted to add for my male friends of color, of how they encourage, like with NASPA, just the different affinity groups, whether it's cultural or if it's focusing on gender, really finding connections within professional networks to have that support, and just finding ways to continue to it's finding connections, support, and continuing that representation as well, especially when opportunities arise, or it's looking, whether it's presenting, writing, potential jobs, really encouraging some great ways to be supportive in that environment as well.
Great. And I'd like to add to the conversation, one on locally, that our men, when I say our men, I identify myself as African American, Nigerian American, to stand up more and make it more visible, to support the role that women have been given in our society, that women are present with their children, men are absent, that there's got to be a more proactive role for our men in America to stand up against that stereotype that men are absent in the lives of their children. It needs to be intentional, intentionally done, advertised, promoted in every way that we can, because the community is broken, not by the making of the men or the women, but by societal design. So there needs to be intentionality in changing that stereotype by it being more visible and more advertised loudly. Just like we need to drown the stereotype of our Black men being absent in the lives of their children, which really was intentionally designed. We need to take the rope and we need to work as allies. We need to stop attacking each other. That means that men and women need to be allies, young girls and young men need to be allies, and we have to be more assertive in doing that. And then globally, the design of the immigration of our brothers and sisters was also designed to divide and conquer. Therefore, a continuum of anger at each other. That needs to change, because we need to realize that as much as we all realize that this was intentionally designed, because nobody says, I want to sell my child to go suffer. So if you think deeper into that statement, you know that that was designed, just like we see a lot of it happening now where people see white and they call it blue. And so that's all designed. So we need to work as an ally to change that narrative and to actively begin to break down the roadblocks that would help Africa, because I'm here speaking from the perspective of Nigeria, Africa, that it's going to take Ubuntu. Ubuntu is because of you, I am me, and because of me, I'm you, and it's the world. That it's got to be that, because the rest of the world is doing that to promote and build their continent and to build Africa. The African men in America need to stop pointing fingers, and vice versa. African men need to stop pointing fingers. They need to work as ally with the women, because that's what's going to change the world. Because when Africa becomes stronger, it'll be a better world. So those are my thoughts on a global packaging. Thank you, Sherwood. So nice to have you.
Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts that they'd like to contribute? You can feel free to put it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself.
I just want to read a quote by Colin Berumen on Opportunity House while we're waiting for any other reaction. It says, for at least 20 years, we've been teaching our kids to be men, to step up to be men. Well, they're stepping up now. They're doing what we've been asking them to do as a society, yet we're not supporting them on that journey. Just food for thought. And I think it brings to mind for me the need for becoming allies with our young men, the need for us to not just say to them what they should do, but to hold hands and role model what we want them to do, and not to tell them what they shouldn't do, but to start working with them together, men and women, becoming allies to bring a young man to be successful men in our society and contributors, and making positive changes in our society. I just want to say that that allyship is what's needed.
Thanks for sharing that. That's just a great note to end on. So we do want to just thank you all for being here and sharing this space. And all of you shared amazing examples, and I feel inspired, and I'm walking away with something, and I hope you all are as well. Please feel free to visit this website for the Work-Life Integration Project. We do interview people who want to share with us their stories about their life journey and their life experiences pertaining to work-life integration. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you contribute to the project. I also want to just invite you to subscribe to our newsletter at the Interfaith Center. We do events on Zoom, and we do it in person. Next Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're going to do an interfaith prayer bead workshop. So we're going to be looking at different religious traditions that use prayer beads, like the mala beads or the rosary. And we're just going to look at different, or how our differences are also similar. And so if you'd like to join us, please feel free to RSVP on our website. And I want to thank all of my fellow researchers for joining us today. Thank you, Margaret, for leading this project. And thank you, Amanda, for having such a great idea to really focus on male allies. And Sherwood, thank you for being our male that made it all the way to the end. Thank you for being an ally just in that representation of you. Are you in Vermont right now?
Yes, all three of us are at the University of Vermont. It's actually sunny and about 25. There's not any snow on the ground, but it's a more appropriate seasonal picture at least.
Wow. Well, thank you all for being here. That's pretty awesome. We loved having you here.
Thank you.
Since this was recorded, if somebody else here wanted to watch it, how would I get access to the recording?
I'm going to post it on our YouTube channel, which will be available through our website. But I can send you the link as soon as it's active. I have to upload it, and it takes a few hours.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you for your time and thoughtfulness.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much for
Yeah,
being
thank you. Nice
here.
meeting you.
Angela and Susan. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yeah, this was great.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.